What's going on, guys? It's a 1999 model XJ. It's got about 100,000 miles on it. Doing a lot of work on it, as you can see. Today I'm going to put new shocks on it, and I've already removed one. This is from the front driver's side, and you can see here, right there's the shock hole. It's typically under the master cylinder, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if you're looking at yours, the master cylinder would be here. You've got to get under that master cylinder and get to that nut. I was doing some brake work anyway. I was putting a new master cylinder on, so I was able to get to the bolt after I removed my master cylinder. It made it a lot easier. Now, if you don't have anti-lock brakes, this truck does, because it was a state-owned vehicle. You can just take a ratchet wrench, I think it's a 15 millimeter, come right under in this space here, come right under there, and get that nut off with no problem. If you do have anti-lock brakes and you have your master cylinder here and you have your air box here, it is not easy to get off, folks. You got to try to fish a wrench under here. Maybe if you get it on a lift, it'd be a little easier. And then the other side will be a lot easier. We'll just get a socket on that. If this is the first time you're changing shocks on a Cherokee, you've got any amount of rust, these bolts here, they tend to break off. So be careful with these. Make sure you spray them down with a penetrating oil. All right, so on the rear, the shocks are fairly straightforward. You have one bolt here. I think it's an 18 millimeter. And then you have two bolts up top. If you're going to break a bolt, changing these shocks on an XJ, it's typically going to be on the rear. And I've seen these break before. And then if that happens, you can weld in another stud, or you can try to drill it out and put in your own bolt. Not advisable, because you need this stud here to hold the weight. So you really need to have it rewelded if it breaks. And then up top, let me show you that. If you're going to break a bolt, 9 times out of 10, this is where you're going to break it. You're going to break one of those two bolts there. These are the bolts that welded nuts into the unibody, and if you have a rusty Jeep, you're going to break one, especially if your shocks are many years old and you have any amount of rust on your frame. And you can see my frame is fairly rust free. You see that bolt is rusty, and that shock fork that's holding that shock on is rusty. So I could have problems. I've sprayed it down really well. Actually, I've sprayed it a couple of times over the last few days in preparing for this. But if you do break them off, there are a couple of different things you can do. I think Rusty's Off-Road, they make a nut cert kit to put back in there. If you break it off, you can research that. But I sprayed mine down pretty good. I went with Bilstein shocks. I think it's the 4600 series. These are for stock vehicles. This Cherokee is completely stock. It's not lifted. I want to keep it that way. I'm not too happy about the yellow and blue combination. These shocks come with, the front comes with a new mounting kit. Comes with a new nut for the top. You don't get nuts for the bottom. You can get your nozzle right under that fork. Now you're able to get that penetrating oil behind that bracket and then all over those threads where it's going to matter. Trying to save those nuts. If you've ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. I want to make sure we soak these really good too. I soaked these a couple of days ago as well. Well, that one's coming off really easy. I'm just turning it with my hand. Never fails. Let's see where it went. We get a new bolt anyway. So these bottom bolts are a 13 millimeter. Now that I broke it by hand, I'll put some power to it. Now that shock should just come out. So these shocks are not original to the truck. I've looked up the model number, and they are Monroe Reflex shocks, which are not that, I mean, it's a mid-range shock. These are about $40 a piece. So they were changed at some point, but this driver's passenger side, I'll show you it. Just compress it. It still has some compression. But look at this driver's side. It's completely toast. You can see what that leak in the master cylinder did to that shock boot. All right, let's see if we can get this one here to break loose. Pretty easy. If yours is really rusty, it would help to clean those threads with a wire brush before you did this. I didn't even think to use a ratchet wrench on this. I've got one. All right, I'm gonna tempt the upper bolts now. Try not to break them. I just have a really long extension. I'm coming down by the shock and under the axle. Oh my gosh. They're not budging. Not budging. Let me put the power to it so if I can't wiggle it loose. I may put some heat on it first. Yep. Let's see if I can get some heat up there. Awful close to that gas tank. You know what? That gas tank is only about 6 inches away. 8 inches maybe. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Well, my Ryobi nut driver can't do it. I've got a bigger impact driver, but it'll just snap it off. Something gave. Yep, there it goes. Well, let's see if we can go ahead and break the other one off. All right, I just went ahead and converted to a 1/2 inch pull bar. Go ahead and break them. at this point. There we go. Well, that one broke off as well. So another thing you may run into is this crap right here. And that seal, I don't know if it's just rotted around that stud, but this shock will not come off. I beat the heck out of it. Actually punctured it. See, fluid went everywhere. It just will not come off. What in the heck? Holding that on there. Now I'm just going to take a nice Sunday afternoon, change my shocks. I guess that boot had just welded itself to that stud there. Yeah, I'll clean that up real good. I'm gonna spray the other, when I get the nut off the other side, I'm gonna put tons of penetrating oil in there and see if I can't help it. Well, I was gonna take an air hammer and try to get those welded studs out where those bolts broke. That's the first thing we have to do is get the studs out. But I can't find the bits to my air hammer. So I got a long punch here and a big hammer. See if we can do it with that. If not, I have to run and get some bits for the air hammer. I can't get enough force on it. I need a longer punch, but I don't think I have anything longer. So I have a longer punch. I think it's going to be too lightweight. We'll see. Well, it actually worked. Okay. This was not as easy. This one's not wanting to budge. So I sharpen my bit to see if I can't run up to the side of it. It'll just dig in there and pop out. I think it's moving, but I gotta rest. Good gosh. That sucks, guys, but that's what you have to do. An air hammer would have made that a lot easier. I'm sure I'm gonna have to do the other side too. I'm just gonna take the pull bar, and if they break, they break. I'm gonna go ahead and order the Nutsert kit. I mean, I can fish some bolts in there myself. The problem with that, if I ever have to change shocks again, or somebody else, I'll never be able to get them off without getting a wrench in there. I may be able to get a wrench in there pretty easy, actually. I don't know. Let me give it some thought. So here's that nut, that welded nut that we punched out of there. You can see where the welds broke loose. And then the top, you can see where the stud comes through. Just look at that rust. That's what you're up against when you go after those bolts. This Jeep came from Missouri, so even though it's relatively rust-free, still took its toll up there. If you got a nice clean Jeep from Texas or Georgia, Florida, California, you may get lucky. All right, so now for the other side. I'm not going to film this one, guys. Just assume I'm going to break the bolts. I'll let you know. Well, one came out, and then one broke. This one actually broke loose, went about 2 turns, then broke, which that kind of makes me mad because even though this one came out, I've still got to punch the other side out if I'm going to use the Nutserts. Still haven't decided yet. So I broke this loose. You can see by rounding a little there, and it was really tough. I thought I was going to break that stud getting it loose. I'm going to clean it up a little before I continue. Made it much easier cleaning it. Oh man, that is stuck on there. It's not budging. See if we can get some penetrating oil in there. I mean, that won't even spin. Yeah. Just gonna let that soak. May have to apply this 2 or 3 times. And you guys can see I have that 3rd jack stand back there just for safety. And on the front I have a jack as well as the jack stands. You guys make sure you do that if you're under here with jack stands. There's that other rear shock at Monroe Reflex. I compressed it. It's not even pushing itself back out yet. I'm not just bashing Monroe shocks, but come on, folks. Those things are pitiful. They probably haven't been on there but about 40,000 miles. I have the maintenance records from the state of Missouri on this Jeep. I don't want to ever have to do that again. I got on the other side and I knocked the first one out okay. And then that second one where the bolt actually came out, somebody had been there before me. That's the reason this came out, is because whoever did it before broke the bolt, and then they did some type of extraction tool and they cut into it. Half of this bolt was gone, and then they did a couple of spot welds on it and then retapped it, and they spot welded it into the side of the sheet metal so it wouldn't punch out. So I had to punch half of it out. I don't have that part to show you because it's up in the Jeep somewhere. Then I had to go in there with a Dremel and grind that piece of weld off. I got it done, and then I took a piece of metal I had and I cut it down and made my own punch to get my length. That's how I got the other side done. But man, I don't wish that on anybody. If I had it up on the lift with some air tools, it'd probably been a lot better. But anyway, it's done. I'm gonna go ahead and order those forks. They're kind of those nut certs, or not, they're not really certs. They're kind of a Y with a long handle on it, and they got the little nuts welded on the top, and you go up under that cavity, you put it in, and then you're able to tighten your shocks back up. But I'll show you that when I get them in. It's been 2 or 3 days, so these just kind of slide up into that cavity, and we have new nuts there that are can bolt up to. I think these were $16, and then they come with just regular grade bolts. I went by and picked up some grade 8 bolts because why not? You can get grade 8 bolts at Tractor Supply. You can buy them by the pound. I got a couple of different lengths. That 3/4 inch length will probably work, but I'll just go with the 1 inch. I also picked up some anti-seize. I'm going to use that. So maybe in 5 years, if I decide to change the shocks again, or if I get a broken shock or something, I can save myself some grief. All right, so I have the bracket in, and I currently have the nut sitting over with 2 holes. I'm gonna go ahead and get a nut started. I got one started. I think I have the bracket upside down. Let's see. I do. I have the bracket upside down, folks. There we go. So on one side, it's not setting exactly flush. I have a little piece of that nut that I didn't get completely off. I'm gonna have to pound out one little piece. Yeah, that's a piece of that nut. I'll fix that. I knocked a little bit more of it out. There's still a little ridge on it. I think it'll be okay. All right, I got one started. I can start one because the shock mount is forked. Doing this by yourself, that helps because you can kind of rest the shock on that one side, and then start the other one. I gotta hold that shock back this way. Get that shock flush. There we go. before I snug them up, I'm gonna go ahead and get the lower shock on. All right, so I got it on the lower mount. So I'll go ahead and snug these up. Two things, guys. I didn't put a washer on it. I also forgot to put the thread seal. So what I'm going to do is take them off one at a time, put the thread seal on, and put the washer. I should have known better than that. I'm gonna save the camera battery. All right, guys, got this side done. Got the washer on there. I put anti-seize on there as well. Tightened them up. All right, got the other side done. It was a little bit harder because that bracket, you can see it up there. You don't have much to hold on to. And then you have this fuel return line in the way, fuel line, and that plug. I didn't have to take any of that loose. I got around it. But it worked. And the front shocks just go in self-explanatory. Very easy. Just make sure that you got a rubber boot and washer on that side. See if I can show it to you there. You see it there. And then, and I clean my bolts up. The shocks don't come with new bolts, so I just use a wire brush. Clean them up real good. Get that bolted down, do the other side, and shocks will be done. All right, guys, that is shocks installed on the XJ. If you get into the rear bolt snapping, good luck to you, but it can be fixed. Look out for another video on the Jeep. I'm doing kind of an overall build on it. New brakes, rotors, brake lines, master cylinder, pretty much everything here. This Jeep is a true survivor. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. All right, guys, I've driven it around town a few times and everything seems to be going well. I'm about to take it out to the hunting club. I don't know if you can tell, but the rear end sets up just a little bit higher. But maybe that'll set down. Guys, thanks for watching the video and see you next time.